Welcome to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guests on today's podcast are a married couple with 3 children, my friends Nate and Elena. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
I wish you all could see them on the screen. They're just this wonderful couple in their 40s, full of life and goodness, and they're going to talk about their journey with a transgender son, but it'll be broader than that. They're both converts to the church, so they'll talk about why they joined the church. They'll talk about their life in the church. They'll talk about how things have gotten really complicated for them as Latter-day Saints with children, a transgender son, and just children that have a worldview that conflicts with some church teachings, especially for full inclusion for LGBTQ people and women, and how that has been something that Nate and Elena have processed. So they'll talk about that, and just, that's complex. And if you, and this is just this wonderful couple sharing their story. Is that okay for an introduction?
Perfect.
Very good.
So I'll just turn it over to you two to kind of get us started where you want to start.
Okay, well, I'll start. I am originally from Santiago, Chile, and I became a member of the church when I was 14. I lived with my grandmother, who was Catholic, and she would bring me to church every Sunday, and I started taking lessons to have my first communion, which I did, and then I decided to do confirmation, which were many years studying in the church. But there were many questions that I did not receive answers for while I was studying. One of them being what's going to happen to me after this life. I had no answers that made me feel peace, that made me feel like I really want to be there. I felt like what's going to happen if I can see my family again. So I had all these questions, and I remember praying to God to help me find a place where I could find these answers. And I think that after I prayed for about a month waiting, I met this friend who was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he invited me to a youth activity. And once I attended, I felt the Spirit. I felt that this is the place where God wants me to be. And once I met the missionaries, that confirmed that that's where God wanted me to be, when they answered all the questions that I had about the afterlife, about family, that families could be together forever, about the temple, about what happens with the spirits after this life. So that was an amazing testimony of that was a true church. That's where God wanted me to be. So that was a really amazing experience for me to be a missionary and to become a member of the church.
It's great. We're glad you're here.
Thanks.
Yeah, just keep telling your story. I don't know if Nate wants to tell his conversion story or whoever you want to go with this.
Sure. Yeah, we can circle back to you in a minute.
Sure.
So I was raised in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and was raised a Unitarian Universalist, which is kind of an ecumenical, all-inclusive religion of all religions and philosophies, kind of blended into one. And I had a wonderful childhood, but the spirituality that I developed wasn't structured enough for me. I'll put it that way. And so I was always kind of seeking for more and kind of jumping into different philosophies and trying out different ways of being, and nothing truly fit until I was actually a junior in college and studying for an exam, and heard one of those old Book of Mormon ads.
Wow.
That the church used to produce, or maybe still does, I don't know, before the advent of the internet. And was just heard, call for a free Book of Mormon. My roommate was watching TV in the other room, and really it was this moment of synchronicity, and the Spirit just touched me really hard. Like, wow, what do the Mormons believe? What do the Mormons believe? And I grew up with a close family friend who I knew was Mormon, and just was a wonderful man that we loved as a family so much, that I was like, well, if he's a Mormon, the Mormons can't be all that bad. Let's find out what the Mormons believe. And so the missionaries came by and knocked on my door, and I'd forgotten that I'd even ordered a Book of Mormon, because the exams were over by that time, and I was just, done, forgotten that experience. And so I invited them in, and their story of this young man seeking for truth really resonated for me. And I really identified with Joseph Smith Jr. and started reading the Book of Mormon and just absorbing every word of it. I just couldn't put it down, and really, really found a spiritual home in Stamford, Connecticut, where there was a singles ward there that I was baptized into, and met all these young people that were living these clean lives. And I just had never met people that were young, that were into sobriety and into chaste living. And it's just like blown away. Who are these people? My friends and all, we just like to party, So it was a real revelation for me, that you can have this clean lifestyle and a real rock solid religious experience. And so I just jumped in head first, and maybe we can go back to you now, Elena. We can talk about our missions.
Sure. And after I decided to become a member of the church, my grandmother was not happy about it, of course. She wanted me to continue being Catholic because that's how I was baptized. And but I kept attending the church, and she saw that I had good friends, that I wasn't planning to just run away with my boyfriend and get pregnant. That's all she cared about. And so she was okay with it, and she even attended once or twice for some activities, but she never was interested in becoming a member, or not in my family. In fact, nobody else in my family is a member of the church, even though I tried to share with them. And eventually, after attending Young Women, I decided to go on a mission. And wow. I went to the South, Osorno mission. And it was really hard because I had not support. I didn't have support wow. from my family. My mom was okay. She was not happy that I was going to be away for a year and a half, and she didn't understand what I was doing. So it was hard not to have her support. She didn't write to me very often, which it was really hard. And just the mission itself, just being in the South, it's really cold and rainy down there. And just being out in the streets, it was a really hard mission for me. And getting along with companions. I'm the only child in my family.
Wow.
So I really didn't have experiences of siblings, or didn't know really how to get along with people my age, though I think I did pretty well with my companions. I had really, really good friends. But in spite of all these difficulties, I think that the mission was an amazing experience that taught me how to serve, taught me more about Christ, about God, and to have a testimony of them. And also, I gained a testimony of the Book of Mormon and of Joseph Smith, because I felt that my testimony before that was not as strong enough. But as I served a mission, I felt like it was true.
Thanks for your service, Elena.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Tell our listeners, just in case they didn't pick that up, where you served. The name of the mission.
Santiago, in the south of Chile. It's called Osorno, Chile. Okay.
And is that one of the most furthest parts of Chile south? So that just gets colder and colder, of course, in that hemisphere, the further south you go on. Yes. Chile goes way down there, I think.
Yeah, it's the longest country in the world. And down in the south is always cold, even in the summers. So, wow. And I had 2 winters too. So
wow.
It made it even more sweet.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about your mission.
Sure. So after I was baptized, within a year, I was called to my mission. It was an amazing experience. I went to Mexico City East, and it was incredible. I loved it to death. Granted, of course, like Elena said, it was extremely challenging, to always have to be with your missionary companion, and, you get on each other's nerves, in such proximity. But it was just incredible. The people were amazing. Still lifelong friends that I have, having met in the mission, both as companions and people we served. And yeah, it's just living the gospel to me, and doing nothing, but sharing it, just on the buses, like walking down the street, stopping every single person and knocking on every single door. And we experienced incredible success. The people were Latin America was on fire. I don't know how it is today, but back in the, I was there from 1998 to 2000. It was on fire, and we were just bringing to pass all the prophecies of the Book of Mormon, and it was just magical.
It's really cool. Were you two serving at the same time, even though you didn't know each other?
Excuse me, I think 97.
So a little bit,
98.
a little overlap.
Yeah, just a tiny bit.
You can just tell how much you love your missions. This is audio only. I wish everybody could see your faces as you talk about your missions and your conversion and just the interaction between you. And there's a lot of differences in your story, but there's so many similarities, being converts and being drawn to our doctrine, and the courage to then go on a mission without the family support, without 15 years of primary and Sunday school, and to sort of go and do that. It's really courageous. And I, grew up in a family where I've been prepared to serve a mission kind of mentally since the beginning of time. So I always have great love and respect for people that serve missions, joining our church as converts. And often, you reach people that no one else can reach, because you can talk authentically to joining the church, and the contrast between your other faith traditions and the good there, and the added good through our restored doctrine that you brought to the people that came into your own lives, and that you shared with people in Chile and in Mexico City. Keep telling your story. I'd love, our listeners are obviously going to be curious how you two met, because you're right now not in the same part of the world at all. And there's no logical right now connection. But somehow this is going to happen.
Yeah, the only opposite places in the world. So yeah, after I served my mission, I have a family in New York City. So I always saw their pictures, and they would send us letters. So I always had interest and felt like, I really would love to go to the United States someday. And so that was in the back of my mind. And so then one of my best friends, and I had a good friend who was living in Utah back then. So right after my mission, I got a job, and I started saving money. And both my friend and I decided to get our visas, and we went to Utah. And we got a student visas, and so we started studying in an English ESL schools. And then I applied to study at BYU. And I was accepted.
Wow,
so that was
awesome.
Yeah, that was great. I felt so blessed. And they gave me a whole year of a scholarship, which to me, it was an amazing thing because back then I only had a part-time job. So it was really helpful to be able to have 1 year to be able to save, to keep paying for my studies. And so to me, coming from Chile to Utah was an enormous culture shock. Not just being a different country, but also being in Utah, which is the church, the culture of the church is amazing. I mean, I loved it. I loved going to the Word and see that there were so many people who had even ancestors who were direct ancestors from Brigham Young and Joseph Smith. It was just an amazing to meet all these people, and so strong in the church. I just loved it. And then I started studying at BYU, and I was there for a year and a half. And one of my roommates said, there's a dance going on in one of the wards, and do you want to come? And I was not really interested in going because I actually had a really bad experiences dating in Utah because it's very different. The culture was so different. So I was dating guys who were longtime members of the church, were born in the church, and I felt that most of them were just looking for their wives. I mean, that was it. I mean, and they knew in the first date if I was going to be their wife or not. So I just decided, I don't want to date anymore. To me, dating was like, okay, we're just gonna go out for a couple months and see how things go. It was really very low key. But when I felt that there was this pressure to be the perfect Mormon, the perfect women to become a wife, I just felt, just forget it. And I decided just to just focus on my studies. And so I was not interested in going to this dance because I was like, I don't want to meet any of these guys who are just trying to find a wife. I'm not into that anymore. But my companion, my roommate, she just insisted. She was just, you have to come. You don't have to worry about meeting anybody. And I was like, okay, I'll just go and just have fun. So we got there, and my friend, one of my best friends, she was also my visiting teacher back then. I see her waving at somebody, and I looked, and I see this like really tall, handsome, blonde guy, and I asked her, and I said, "Who is that?" And she said, "Oh, that's my brother." And I said, "Let's go," and introduce me to him, even though I was not interested in meeting anybody, but he really caught my attention. So my friend and I went, and she introduced me to him. And he was with Nate. They were both on a double date that night. And after I got to know her brother, I just didn't feel like I was interested anymore. But I started talking to Nate, and we discovered that we had so many things in common. He was the only member of the church in his family. He spoke Spanish really well. And back then I was recently starting with my studies, so I was still not very sure about the language much. So it was great that he was speaking Spanish to me. And so we just started talking, and we were, I don't know, our conversation was like for a couple hours, I think. And we danced a little bit, but it was mostly talking about all the things that we had in common. And he had served a mission, I had served a mission, I both converts. So there were so many things that I really liked about him. Do you want to continue with the story?
This is great. I just love this story.
Yeah, it was magical. And thankfully she wasn't too bamboozled by my handsome companion, and I was able to win her over with my talk. So to kind of circle back on after my mission, bring you up to where I went to BYU. I had already graduated college by the time I went on my mission, and had majored in as a dual major in education and psychology. I knew I wanted to go into those fields, but wasn't sure how. And actually went in to become a special education aide. I worked with a child with ADHD and a child with autism and a child with Down syndrome. And I was in the classroom with these three children, helping them to be included into their mainstream classrooms. And so I was a special education aide. And I worked with school psychologists during that time. And so I decided I wanted to become a school psychologist. And so I applied to the BYU program and got in. And thanks in part to my wonderful mission president, I'm sure, President John Pingree, wrote me. I actually came home too late from my mission to apply. And so he got me a special exception. And I'm pretty convinced got my application to rise towards the top because I was his assistant in the mission. and we became close friends. I'm still very close with his wife Carmen to this day. Anyways, BYU was a wonderful experience. Getting my master's, but most of all, meeting Elena. Elena's been by far the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. So, it made moving out to Utah so worth it.
That's just a great love story, and I love it. And John Pingree is somebody I worked with in the Salt Lake Temple with. We were temple workers together.
Wow.
He's older than me and has passed away, as you know.
Yeah, I know.
Just in the last 6 months or so, I think.
Yeah. I was able actually to speak with John in his last days when he was surrounded by family.
I'm glad.
Had just a really powerful conversation with President Pingree.
What a great family. They've done so much for autism in our community, and so many ways they've served. And his
Carmen's
son,
done a wonderful thing for advocating for children with autism.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful family, and I love the way that the Pingree family has blessed you, and that you were with your mission president, had some final time with him.
It was very special to me.
Talk about, I want to kind of get to where you are now. It sounds like once you got married, there was this period of time in the church where everything just worked great. And I'm assuming you had callings and it was just clicking on all cylinders. And maybe that was a couple decades you could kind of, and then, things have changed. And now you're in this space where you're recognizing just challenges within the church. You have a transgender son. And it's sort of like you open the hood and seen there's some real challenges here. At the same time, there's beautiful restored doctrine and great beauty here. And it's just complex. So I don't know if you want to talk, where you just want to go to, if you want to talk about where you are now, or kind of talk about those great years.
Let's give a little bit more background. So like you said, Richard, smooth sailing, loving, everything, callings, service, 3 wonderful children. And the first time our boat got rocked was for Prop 8. And for your listeners who might not know what I'm talking about, Proposition 8 was a Californian ballot measure, I guess, that was calling for marriage between homosexual couples to be illegal. And the church heavily backed it. And for me, it was a very disorienting process because up until then, I really didn't know anything about the church's position on gay marriage and didn't consider it an issue. And on the contrary, actually, was really challenged in my testimony because the church backed it to such a degree that it was spoken from the pulpit that we needed to dedicate, all of our time and resources and, money to back this proposition. And I felt very uncomfortable about it. And it was a crisis for me because here, I think it was Thomas S. Monson, or maybe it was Gordon B. Hinckley. I can't quite remember.
I think President Monson was the prophet.
Okay, it was President Monson? Okay.
Yeah, during Prop 8.
Here a prophet was telling us this is something that, was very important. We never heard before any sort of, political type influence from our local leaders and saying, this was a letter from the prophet and the apostles. And it really rocked my world. And I remember having conversations with Elena and our bishop and, my friends about it, and feeling such an incredible pressure that I needed to get in line with the prophet. I needed to, follow the prophet and get on board, or else I felt like I was not in full support, and that I was violating my baptismal covenant, violating what I felt. I mean, Jesus Christ, I believe, is at the head of the church. And how do I not support this if Jesus Christ is prompting my prophet to get me to back this up? So I prayed and prayed and prayed until I got a testimony. now in retrospect, I don't want to do too much of, analyzing it from where I am now, but I realized that I prayed myself into believing it, because, to be in disharmony with any aspect of the church for me was just unacceptable. And so that was a really hard experience.
And thanks for just being honest with that. I think there's a lot of members that feel the same way.
Mm-hmm. And to me personally, I never had any issues with growing up. I had friends who were gay. I never felt that they were doing bad things, so that they were sinning. But once I became a member of the church, I changed my view and my perspective on gay people, and I became completely indoctrinated that that being gay and acting upon those feelings was a sin, because for the longest time that's what I believed. So I was fine with that, with Prop A. I was like, okay, well, if this is what the prophet and the leaders of the church are asking us to do, well, this is what I'm going to do. Though I was not openly expressing my opinion of how I felt, because I still had friends who were gay. I did not say anything, but in my heart, I was with the prophet. I was supporting what they were asking us to do.
And for our listeners, I just on timing, Prop 8 is, and Nate and Elena probably know this as well as anybody, it was 2008. I don't know what time of year the vote was taken. I was just looking at President Monson's time. He was called to be the prophet on February of 2008. So I think he was a new prophet. And you're right, President Hinckley preceded him. And so I think that, President Monson was the prophet that got behind Prop 8 and sort of, was the one that championed that through the church. So I just want just our listeners to make sure I didn't miscommunicate. I don't remember when the vote was. Probably doesn't really matter. I assume it was towards the end of the year because most votes are towards the end of the year. So, but this isn't really a political podcast, so some of you know the exact date of the vote. Yeah, I mean, I just like you being honest with how you felt. And there's a real feeling of equality that a lot of Latter-day Saints feel for those that, a feeling that they want the same things for them that we have for us. And just recognize that was a disconnect for some. And I remember asking my dad about Prop 8, and, he said, and my dad's pretty wise, and he's 90 now and still really wise. And he said, I'm not sure all the leaders completely were unified on that. I think after Prop 8 happened, we probably looked at that and thought, well, that probably did some real damage for us in some ways. I'm a marketing guy, so I thought, well, that really didn't help the church. To me, I didn't feel like Prop 8 helped us grow and helped our image because it divided us in a way that I didn't feel good about. I love standing up for our doctrine and standing up for truth, but in that situation, it felt like it divided us and didn't bring us together as the same human family. And really good members of our church struggled with that, not because they weren't faithful or didn't pray or weren't committed. It was a conflict for them. So thanks for being honest with that. And so that's roughly 12 years ago when kind of the first thing happened. Mm-hmm. And I, living in Utah, I was aware of Prop 8, but I wasn't engaged with it like you were and being asked to do the things you were being asked to do. And I'm more aware of that now. But go ahead and just keep sharing your story.
Yeah. Then our children started to grow, and I was the leader of the activity day girls. So my kids were already 8 or 9, and they were attending with me. And I remember Glen. He would always ask questions. Says, "Mom, why do we always have to do crafty things? Why is it all girly things? Why are the boys having more fun activities? Like, I want to go fishing. I want to go, I want to do camping with dad." And, he was always interested in doing things like the boys. So those, when we look back, those were the things that we think were the first signs. And like playing with dolls, hated princesses. I always wonder, why did this hate princesses so much? Because I loved them when I was a kid. But anyways, I was like, well, that's fine. Right?
Didn't like the color pink. Didn't like to wear dresses.
Hated dresses. I mean, if you look at pictures of wearing dresses, it's so uncomfortable. You would not like it. But anyway, those were the first things. And then about when they were 10 or 11, Glen started saying, I don't understand why only men have the priesthood in the church. And Nate and I looked at each other. It was like, what kind of question is this? I was like, I never questioned. I actually never, as a woman, really never cared about having the priesthood personally. Not that I didn't appreciate what it did. It's just, to me, it was like one more thing to do. one more responsibility to have. So I was happy with like, oh, I'm okay with not having the priesthood. Just my husband can have it. So to me, like asking those questions, I was like, why do you want the priesthood? Well, I just think that it's not fair that only men have it. So that was something else. And then what else?
Well, I think then what happened was about 4 months ago, maybe 5 months, time is passing. It really just came to a head where he came to us and said, I've got something really important to tell you. It was very nervous, very emotional, had given it a great deal of thought and deliberation, and said, I am, and at first, this is what he said. He said, I am asexual. And Elena and I said, okay, tell us what that means. And he said, well, that means that I don't have any sexual attraction to anybody, male or female. So, in the back of my head as a dad, like, cool. You're 13 years old. Keep it going as long as you can. But I did, of course, say that, and he was like, okay, well, tell me more. How have you come to realize this? And so as he went into it, it kind of became this more of a gender issue, actually, because he's like, I don't feel sexual attraction, but I feel that I am what's called gender fluid. Okay, what does that mean? Because, I honestly, didn't really know what gender fluid was. And I wanted to hear from him how he interpreted that. And said, well, Mom, Dad, I some days I feel like a boy and some days I feel more like a girl, but I'm not really at either end of, being fully boy or fully girl. And it changes day to day. And so I want you to call me, when you refer to me in the third person, I want you to refer to me as them. And okay, deep breath. As a parent, we're like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Wow, but not saying anything, that would express any sort of, judgment or help, making him feel uncomfortable with who he is, and just being supportive, like, okay, we're going to help you through this. And it was very scary for him to share this, very, very emotional experience to disclose this to us. And we just tried to be as calm as possible and loving and just unconditional respect and acceptance, and just listening. All we could do was listen and reflect back to him just our unconditional love for him.
Wow, great job.
Yeah, to me in the beginning it was really, really hard. I felt like, what's happening? Am I losing my daughter? What's happening to my daughter? I remember crying many times because I would look at pictures of him, like so cute. And I felt like I don't have a daughter anymore. But, and the other thing that really I had a hard time with, it was the pronouns. he really wanted me to use they. And oh boy, it was like, for me as a English learning speaker, it was really hard because I had learned, the grammar the right way. So using the grammar incorrectly, to me, it was like, no, that's a no. But so I said to him, I'm sorry, I'm calling you G. I'm trying to use your name, the name that you want now. Please don't ask me to use the they. It just seems so strange to me. He got really, really upset. And he seemed like he was really sad and depressed. And I thought about it so much. And it was like, okay, I don't want my child to be sad. If I have to do it, if I have to make an enormous effort to be grammatically incorrect, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to start calling them they. And so we made a lot of mistakes, of course. But finally, I think we got it. We started saying they.
Yeah.
And
it was very, very hard.
Yeah.
And the name change, just to it really was like a process of grief, like
Sure.
we really felt like our daughter had died, and now we have a son, and right now we can celebrate the birth of a son. And
yes.
we really love it that we now have a boy. But to rewind 4 or 5 months ago, it was crushing. And although we never showed that to him, no. We would just, really just pray. I've never prayed so hard in my life to show love and to respect his new name and respect the pronouns. And thankfully, actually, the next transition from that was to full male. And so it didn't take him long, maybe a month of being they and gender fluid before he said, you know what, guys, actually, now I'm not feeling at all feminine. And what's interesting was he later told us, months later, that he it wasn't such an organic process of him unfolding or developing from gender fluid into transgender male. He was actually easing us into it because he knew that it was going to be so hard. And I think he had connected with peers who were in the LGBTQ community that had been further down along the lines of transitioning, and had told him, you know what, go easy on your folks, ease them into it. So he had this plan, and it worked actually really well, because by the time he said, you know what, I'm not gender fluid, I'm a boy, and I want you to call me he, we were actually grateful for that, because it was so confusing with the being fluid, like how is he feeling today? And he bought these pronoun pins, and he would put a pin. Oh, and remember the pronoun board. This was like really important for him to get the pronouns and everything right. So he bought these pins, and if he was wearing a he them, that meant he was feeling more masculine. And if he put on a different pin a different day, he would say let's say she them, then we would know that he's feeling more feminine. And then he had a little whiteboard that he would update his pronouns. And so that was like really challenging for us, like daily, to kind of like, okay, where's he at, on the continuum. So by the time he said I'm male, we were kind of like, oh, phew. Like now we can go from them to he and know just, that's how he feels every day. And it's been months and months now where every day, there's no equivocation whatsoever. He's fully committed as a transgender male.
In the beginning, I felt like I was hoping that it was just going to be a phase, because he had a lot of friends at school, and he would participate with their gay community at school. And I just felt like maybe it's just something that he just wants to fit. Maybe he just wants to be like his friends. So I was hoping it was a phase. But now, after all this time, we know it is not. We're sure that he is a he.
This is a really beautiful segment of parenting this to me is parenting. This is what we plan our whole lives for as parents, is to be there in the most difficult and the most beautiful moments of our kids' lives. And I'm just struck that this wonderful son, this transgender son of yours, has you two as his parents. And I love your honesty that there's grief here. I think other parents of transgender kids needs to hear that grief you feel because you lost a daughter. And your son didn't cause that. It's just the reality of your situation. I think we have to give parents a chance to mourn that.
Yeah.
And accept that it's the stages of grief. And then I think if we're able to do that, it's easier then to accept. And you even use some wonderful words, Nate, about just in a positive term, we have a new son that's just joined our family. What a wonderful way, if your transgender son listens to this podcast, to hear that as you describe him joining your family. And I'm just thinking of him and how, this is just a beautiful love story, a beautiful parent story in the most complex, situation that I know of. I'm struck. I think of Moroni chapter 7, verse 45, when you were talking, because you're living this in your own family situation. It's just charity. You're owning our doctrine is what I think you're doing. And charity suffereth long and is kind. That's what you're doing. Envieth not, is not puffed up, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked. Beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, and endureth all things. Charity is the pure love of Christ, and whoever is found of it at the last days is well with him. I paraphrase that one.
Beautiful.
So I just think you're owning our doctrine the way, and some people, I'm going to read something that you're familiar with, but it's in my book, and it's from the parent of a transgender child. And it's sort of like some listeners may think, well, what's really happened here is your transgender son has been deceived. And this is a sign of the last days, and this is a phase, and he's confused because of friends at school or the media he's watched. And I just don't believe that. And I know you two don't, and your transgender son doesn't. So this is a statement from a mother of a transgender child. I don't believe Satan's work is to deceive people into being LGBTQ. Instead, Satan takes these precious children of God and tells them they are worthless. He tells them there's no place for them in God's plan. He tells them God no longer loves them. He resides in their shame. Satan also resides in our fears, knowing that our fears will hinder our ability to truly love. His gospel to tear families, Satan's goal is to tear families apart and drive people away from the gospel of Jesus Christ. He is succeeding, not because this group is being deceived and are now gay or trans. He is succeeding because he's keeping us from coming together as the body of Christ and loving with pure Christ-like love.
Beautiful.
So I listen to what you're doing as a family. To me, I believe Satan's real and he wants to destroy us, but he has not divided your family over this issue.
Yeah.
And to me, I believe your heavenly parents exist, and I believe that they are so proud of you as parents right now for the way you're raising this precious spirit of theirs that's in your home. And the safety and recognizing you want this child to thrive and be happy and healthy. And I think you're just doing, and it's really complex as LDS parents to do this because you just don't know how this kid fits in the plan.
Yeah.
Keep sharing more of your story.
Well, thinking back on it now, it's been a great blessing. I mean, honestly, I feel at this point like he was always a boy. We believe in the family proclamation of the world, to the world, that gender is eternal, and his gender just wasn't aligned with his biology, and we know that that happens. And this is not an isolated incident. And that was what's helpful actually was we've just read as much as we can up on the subject and listening to your podcast and reading your book and seeing the continuity of stories between these wonderful kids. I mean, Glen has always been, a faithful, great kid. And it's not that he's suddenly, you know, off the tracks, spiritually speaking, you know? In fact, he's more on track than I've ever seen him.
Cool.
When it comes to, you know, who he is. He's, you know, who he feels like he was always meant to be. And you know, and Elena and I putting together the pieces of the puzzle, looking back on his past, it's like, oh my gosh, he's always been our boy. We just didn't know it until now. And so it is a celebration. I really do feel like that. And it's been incredibly hard. Not because of anything in our hearts. Our hearts found it incredibly easy to accept him for who he is. And this is the sad part to me. This is the part that hurts the most, was that we had to really kind of peel off the layers of the onion when it came to our religion, unfortunately, that we cherish so deeply, that has always been the center of our family, you know, of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and how we can focus in on that gospel for Glen and make it work for him. That's our whole focus right now, is how to make the gospel work for him. Because one part that we didn't share about yet in the story, which you already know, Richard, but for your listeners, is that at the same time that Glen came out as trans to us, he and his twin sister also wrote a series of text messages that outlined why they will not be members of our church anymore. And honestly, I mean, you talk about a knife to your heart,
yeah.
and twisting it in your heart. That's how I felt. Because to me, it's not anymore. It was worse than death. That's how I saw it. And that was so terrifying to me, to think that I could lose my child, and yet I'm looking at him and not feel that my religion that I have dedicated everything to, that means more than my own life. I would give my own life for my religion, suddenly is not accepting my child, who I feel like is just exactly who he needs to be. And, you know, reading up on the church, you know, because I had to do a lot of kind of research, you know, to try to convince Glen and his sister, you know, the church is good, you know, it's not condemning you. But they had already, you know, made their minds up. Every single thing that I said or wrote, I wrote letters, you know, to collect my thoughts, and everything that I said fell short because they had already made their mind up. They had already done their research. They had already seen that, you know, the church is very vocal in opposing gay marriage. And, you know, if you're transgender, you know, the policies are such that you cannot go to the temple and receive full access.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
And I just remember when the kids became young women, they just adored going to the temple. It was like,
yeah,
sometimes they would ask, Dad, can you take us to the temple? Let's go and do baptism.
We did baptisms all the time.
And the saddest thing, that when they came after sending all those texts saying, but Dad and Mom, you know, now I can't go to the temple because they're not going to allow me to be there. And to me, that just broke my heart. Yeah.
And that Natalia, his you know, sister, was saying, I can't do it because in good conscience, how could I do it when my twin brother can't do it? And you know, I was like, oh, you kind of got a point. You know, it was like amazing that children had to chastise their parents in a way. I felt rebuked, you know, like that, you know, they were standing on principle, you know, and I was standing on my own principle, but my own principle was like, you know, hey, there's hope for the future, you know, look at Blacks in the priesthood, you know, because they had already researched that. They're like, how could I be a part of a church that has a racist history? And I was like, well, but now we're not, you know, we've changed. Like, that's evidence that even prophets can make mistakes. You know, there were doctrinal problems about the way that Blacks were treated. And now the church has maybe not apologized, but the church has changed its position on that. So this could also happen with gays and transgender. And they were just like, yeah, whatever, Dad. Like, you know, who knows if that could ever happen, you know, in our lifetime? Are we going to really base our lives off of this, hope that one thing's, so we kind of, we've given up, on trying to, get them back. We're right now just trying to make it as gospel centered a home as possible, and really separate out the gospel from the layers of the church that, we feel like are not in harmony um, with, what is Jesus's prime core message of, loving all and reaching out to those who are marginalized in society. I mean, I strongly believe that if Jesus Christ were here on the earth today, the LGBT community would be like his crew. He would be all over, being so wonderful and embracing to them, because they have been marginalized in our society for far too long.
I'm just so touched by this segment. This is, you're so honest with the pain you felt when you recognized you had a couple kids that were choosing not to be a part of something that so dear to you and you've given so much to, and the pain of that, and I just think other parents feel the same pain, and I think we heal each other when we talk about it. And I wish we could talk about this more in our faith communities, because I think there's a lot of people that feel similar pain when their children step away, and they worry about what does this mean for our eternal family. But I think the parents that do the best just say, I'm going to focus on the things I can control, keep my family circle together, and see my kids now, not if they're active in the church or not, but the contributions they're making to the world, to our family, and not just define our relationship by are they coming back to the church or not. I think pure love is this non-agenda love where we just love people because they deserve to be loved, not because our love will bring them back. And I think you're doing that, but it's just so complex. And we don't have very good support systems in the church to sort of grieve with. I mean, if your family story was a terrible illness or a terrible car accident, we would all kind of know how to wrap our arms around you. Yeah. And we'd all kind of get that kind of pain. Maybe not if we hadn't actually walked that road, but this is just so complex and there's so many layers of it. Then it's your own faith that sort of goes through crisis, because you're recognizing my transgender son doesn't have a place in our church. And then you start to see other marginalized groups and you feel the same way. Talk about just, more parts of the story you want to share.
I was remembering on our walks with him in the beginning, because Nate and I truly wanted to stay. We want to stay in the church, and we wanted them to continue participating with us. And Nate and I tried to convince him, like, you can be an ally, you can help those the youth, in your group, if there's anybody who might feel like you. That's something that you could do. But he just felt like, no, that's too big of a job for me. And now I'm going through too many things, and I just can't. And I remember I didn't know how to help him. I would just repeating the things that I've repeated my whole life when I was teaching the discussions and my mission, just saying, all you can do now is to pray and ask Heavenly Father, and if this is right for you or not, just ask him to help you to understand that that Christ lives, that the church is true. I want you to do that. But then after I said that, I was like, well, I mean, do I really feel like this is the right thing for him to do? And I mean, he would just, shake his head, and I knew that he was like, there's no point, Mom. I'm not going to pray. I already know what I want to do. And I remember one time I was feeling so sad and so, I don't know, like down. And I prayed and I said, Heavenly Father, what can I do for my child? I really don't know. Please tell me. And just a feeling of comfort came to me and said, there's nothing you can do. Just the only thing that you can do now is just to listen to him and to love him. Just tell him how much you love him and how much you accept him for who he is. And that answer to me came so strong. I knew that God was telling me, just love him. That's all you can do. You don't need to do anything else. Just love him.
Was that relieving?
It was. It was very relieving because I knew, I mean, I was desperate trying to find a way that I could help him. But that was the answer for me. Just love him. Listen to whatever he has to say and love him and accept him.
We're talking about difficult things. And that's what I believe has been a real blessing for our family throughout this whole experience. We've had many blessings, but one of which was opening lines of communication. We feel like our children now can tell us anything, and that we will be okay with it. Before this groundbreaking, earth-shattering event in our family, there were certain norms, and there was right and there was wrong, and you had to choose the right, and if you weren't going to choose the right, we need to get you on track. And now I'm seeing my role as a parent, and Elena, I think, is on the same page as me, as more of kind of just talking about things and getting them to trust us enough to tell us. And we feel that also in the church, that there's this kind of unwritten rule of not talking about everything because we're afraid of being judged, and we're afraid, that people are going to misinterpret what we say or not understand or condemn us, right? And so just the fact that we can talk about difficult things as a family, and then in our church, I've met, and Elena too, with our bishop.
Yeah, tell our listeners how that's been going, meeting with your local leaders and being honest with them about your story.
We've shared our story one-on-one with many people in our ward, and our stake president, stake president counselor, and stake relief society president, and we have received nothing but support and respect and love. We've been embraced in amazing ways, and I think that's what, as a church, that's what that's where I think this kind of crisis of faith that we are experiencing, and that I think lots of other people in the church are experiencing, can actually help make the church stronger, by recognizing that a lot of us don't fit in. A lot of us are square pegs fitting into round holes, and to make that hole bigger so that we can fit into it, and so I think that's something that is really wonderful that's coming out of all this in our family, and then in our ward and stake. Hopefully these kinds of experiences that we are sharing can trickle out and trickle up, especially to our higher up leaders, to realize that there's, change is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's healthy in any organization to listen to people's stories and pray for revelation, because until you ask for it, you're probably not going to get it.
I've thought obviously a lot about this, and I don't have any LGBTQ children, so I can kind of step away from the issue, and you're living with it. And many members are. And I think the way we treat parents with LGBTQ children, so you're just loving your transgender son, you're calling him by his right pronouns. And if you feel judgment from our faith community for the way you're loving your own kids, then I think that makes your road harder. I think we need to, and it sounds like your leader's doing a good job, just put our arms around you and not feel like you're looking over your shoulder being judged by your faith community, the way you're handling this in your home, but just feel this incredible love and saying, we just support you. You're the parents of your kids. We're not. We love you and we support you, and whatever you need to do to keep your family circle together, we'll support you. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And I just think, I wish sometimes, I'm not a leader of the church, listeners, and this is a church supportive podcast, but if I wish sometimes we were just less sure. And I wish sometimes our leaders would say, dear church members, we've been called of God. thank you for your sustaining vote. I sustain them and support them. I recognize they have the priesthood keys and are called of God, but I wish sometimes they'd say, with LGBTQ, we just have more work to do here.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. We're not at the finish line. Now, we're not saying that means our doctrine will change or needs to change. We just are wrestling with this. And we recognize that LGBTQ members are not having the same experience that straight members in our church are. And our doctrine is all alike unto God, and everybody should feel the equal balm of Gilead. So, dear members, we are working on this, and we recognize it's a need, and we're not at the finish line. And in the meantime, if you're LGBTQ or have LGBTQ people in your family, let's just wrap our arms around those members that we're asking to do really difficult things that we don't really understand completely yet. And let's err on the side of love and empathy. I look at D&C 121, just came to my mind why we were, I just look at what we're, and I see if I can find it real quick. D&C 121. Oh, sorry, listeners. It's always bad when I try to find scriptures. D&C 121:41. By long suffering, by gentleness, by meekness, by love unfeigned. And just that's what we're taught to do as priesthood holders. So let's practice that for LGBTQ members, and just love and gentleness and kindness, and just recognize the difficult things we're asking them to do. And to me, that just builds hope. To me, that doesn't diminish the prophetic mission of our leaders to think like that or talk like that. It actually builds hope in them, more trust in them as our leaders. Any thoughts on that from either of you?
I just wanted to say that it is so important that we speak up. Before Nate and I had this experience, it was like, it just didn't affect us because we did not have anybody in our family close who were affected by being ostracized or by being bullied or having all these problems. We really didn't know anybody personally. And so we just felt like, okay, well, this is how it is, right? But now that we are living this personally with somebody who we love so much, so now is when we really, really feel this, that this is so important, that not only we as members can do so much to actually get those leaders in the church to listen and to do something about it. And it reminds me, a friend of mine said, it actually takes for you to have those experiences, to go through those trials, to really to have that empathy for others. And this is how we become like Christ, because awesome. Christ went through all of this, and that's how he can understand us. And that's why Heavenly Father gives us these trials, because he wants us to be like Christ. He wants us to experience these things so we can understand, that we can love, and that we can have more empathy for other people who are going through these trials. And this is the way I feel right now. I feel that this trial, which I don't feel as a trial, the only thing I worry about is my child to grow and to go into society and be accepted. Those are the worries that I have right now. But I just love having him in my home. I accept him completely.
What a lucky son.
I just want him to be happy. And then that's all I want. And we just have to continue to show how we love them by speaking up and trying to reach out to those who are in power to make those changes.
More thoughts from either of you?
Yeah, I'd like to reflect on this experience. A wonderful part of it that kind of dovetails with what Elena just said about learning to have more empathy. I feel like Glen has really changed my life in such a valuable way. Like, honestly, in some way, I feel like he was put on this earth to teach me a lesson and to help me grow spiritually. Because after my mission, I'll be honest with you, I kind of plateaued. You go to the gym and you start doing the same reps, and you stop really growing muscularly, and you kind of just, but you're going through the motions of going to the gym anyways. That's kind of how I felt for years and years, decades, in fact, after my mission. Because the church was working for me. It was a well-oiled machine. It didn't really need much maintenance. I was happy. But I didn't grow at all spiritually. It was status quo. And then Glen comes around, and my son is born, and my heart has grown. In the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, how his heart grew 3 sizes that day, or whatever it was. When he finally realizes that Christmas came despite the toys being stolen. That's how I feel. I really feel like my heart grew, and all that. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, homophobia is a really horrible word. And so I don't use it lightly. But when I got rid of my homophobia, which I'll admit I had, and I think it's important to admit. I think as a society, we're afraid to admit, I'm not racist. Oh, no, not me. I'm not homophobic. Of course not. Well, you know what? Actually, it's okay to admit I have some racist thoughts sometimes. I was raised in a white society where I just didn't have much experience with people of other ethnicities. It's okay for me to admit that, because if I admit that, then I can actually work to improve myself and not be racist. It's the same thing with homophobia. I'm admitting to myself, and being on your show, admitting it publicly. I had some homophobic, even though I would never have expressed them outwardly, but God sees us in our hearts. And if I have a feeling of judgment towards another person, I am the one condemning myself, and I am the one separating myself from God by separating myself from that person and saying that he's not right. And so I feel like my heart has just really been set free from homophobia because of Glen. And I'm just so grateful for that, because I'm so much freer. I'm so much happier. I don't worry as much about I don't know. I seem to I just obsessed a lot about, that's sinful. That's not sinful. That's, now it's just man, we are just one big human family, and we are all sinful, and we're all saints at the same time, and to come to that realization that your sin is no worse than my sin. And, that being who you are, if that's transgender or that's gay or that's black or white or red hair or, black hair, we are all struggling on this earth to figure it out. And let's just all support each other, and let's not judge each other. And that's just where I'm at right now. I just feel so free, finally. It's just wonderful. So I thank my son for that immensely, because it wasn't me. He was the one that really prompted this all to happen. And I'm really grateful for it.
I'm just really touched by that. I'm touched by this love story is the best word I can use to describe it. There's pain in this, but sometimes the very best love stories involve pain and involve dissonance. And that's where in my life, some of the best growth has ever occurred, is in very difficult moments. But I love this phrase you both use, set free or free. And I just think, I drew 2 circles as you were talking, the circle of everybody in my life that's a lot like me, and my ability to minister to them has never been very difficult if I'm motivated and kind of do. It doesn't require any stretching. But then there's this whole other group of the same human family that's very different than me. And that could be transgender people, gay people, people that have left the church, people who have never joined the church, people of a different race, people that have a different immigration status. And that to me at this point in my life is when I see, we're just coming out of Christmas time as recording this, and I see the life, everything we see about the birth of the Savior. To me, just action words come into my mind as I see him. And I say the way I honor him is to get to work in that other group of people to help lift their burdens, and to look inward like you two have done and say, what do I need to do to look inward to to let go of race, to see for the first time racism or homophobia or transphobia or sexism, so that I can fully understand another group of people and lift their burdens. And to me, that's honoring the birth of the Savior and our doctrine. And what you're doing is just beautiful. And I recognize that can get complicated in our faith, but I'm just hoping that as our faith grows, that people like you feel like, there's place for you here, a feeling of belonging, a feeling you're helping us get to the finish line on a lot of these issues. Paradoxes where you hold kind of two things at the same time that are very difficult to hold. And I think we need to create space for members that believe in our fundamental restored doctrine and the beauty of the church and all the things that cause you to join the church. It's an incredible conversion story, and recognize that this is an area we just have more work to do. And it's an area where it's causing pain for a lot of faithful Latter-day Saints because it just doesn't feel right to them. And just be aware of all that and not judge couples like you for openly sharing how you feel, but just, in fact, embracing you even further for how complex your road is right now and your very best efforts to do this authentically. Everything you're doing right now is completely authentic and completely coming from a place of love. There's no anger, there's no rebellion, there's no desire to pull people in a different direction. You're just doing the very best you can with great hearts and using the doctrine of our church and Christ-like principles. So I went off on a little bit. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No,
I'll turn it back
Richard.
to
It's
you.
beautiful. Yeah, just echo what you said. I mean, the gospel is of love, and if we can just focus in on that and encourage others to see that the potential that we have in our families and as individuals and wards and stakes to elevate this conversation to a place where all people can feel welcome at the Lord's table is the direction that I think the Lord would have us go.
Any other final thoughts, Elena or Nate?
No, I just wanted to say that that I feel grateful that we have leaders in our ward who have been really, really supportive. And we feel like they have really supported our children too. I mean, when I'm in the young women's, one of my calling is in the young women. So I take my children to the young women, and the girls, they're so sweet. They learned that Isabella is not Isabella anymore, that he goes by Glen, and the girls are calling him Glen.
Awesome.
So I just love seeing that support, and I feel really grateful, and I want to encourage everybody in the church to be like so, because it is so important for these children who are already struggling so much every day, and I just wanted to say that to encourage them to do.
Yeah, and to kind of highlight that the importance of this. This is actually a life and death issue, and not to sound too alarmist here, but like we're giving you a summary in almost with rose-colored glasses. Let's be honest, okay? This has been the most tremendously painful process that you can imagine going through, okay? Spiritually, emotionally, as parents, learning to accept our child. I do not want to make it seem like this has been easy, okay? And then for the child, him or herself, okay, this is extremely painful for the child. Gender dysphoria, okay, we don't have time in this segment to go over the ins and outs of it. Google it on your free time. If you're a listener wondering what gender dysphoria is, it is very, very problematic what these children go through, and youth and adults. And so when I say it's a life and death matter, I'm not kidding around, actually. The suicide rates among our transgender and homosexual brothers and sisters is markedly increased. And then and that's just in general society. Then you take it within our church, and it's astronomically high. Okay, and then you take it another level, and if parents do not give unconditional respect and love, oh man, the statistics are grim, really, really grim. Suicide rates are very real. And I think we as a church body and we as just members of the community of the world need to really, really take this matter seriously, or we are going to lose more of our children and more of our brothers and sisters to suicide. Because that is a serious risk. And so I want to put that out there to all of your listeners, Richard, that this is not just us, saying, it's nice to be respectful and it's better to be loving. It's actually like it saves lives. And it's of critical importance that we take this matter very seriously.
Then thanks for being frank like that. And a couple of our guests that have expertise in this area have talked about, I think it's the Joyner model of suicidality. And two of the segments of that model, I think it's a 3-part model, is this feeling of not belonging and a feeling that people are better off without me.
Yeah.
And so if you've got a transgender kid who's incorrectly come to, or maybe because of unsupported parents, don't feel a feeling of belonging in their family, or actually believe that their existence is messing up their eternal family, then it gets them into really dark places. And so that's why I'm really tenderhearted for what you've done with Glen.
Yeah. And just to put it into context, even with all that we have done, even with the unconditional acceptance, it is still tremendously hard for what he is going through. And, I can't even imagine what it would be like for another family who doesn't have access to the kind of healthcare that we have. That's another layer here that let's just put it out there. The privilege that we have of having incredibly good healthcare, to where he has all of the psychological and medical supports available to him to ease this incredibly dysphoric experience that he's going through, has made it infinitely better as well. And so not all people have access to that sort of healthcare. And so that's another important consideration. I think the church also needs to be aware of, to what degree are our leaders properly trained to refer families in our wards to get the care, because it's not just a spiritual sort of ecclesiastical guidance that these kids need. They need serious psychological and psychiatric medical attention, because this is a serious diagnosis. As as your child had cancer, you would not just say, "Oh, I'll take my kid with cancer to the bishop." You get every available resource at the ready.
I love that. And listeners, if there's a couple, I'm thinking of episode 366 with Patrick Mason, the chair of Mormon Studies at Utah State University. He has a new book called Restoration, God's Call to the 21st Century World. And his feeling is the church going to the 3rd century of the Restoration will be taking the gospel to the margins and really recognizing that we're in a position now with the institutional church being mature and temples being mature and our missionary work being mature, this is the time to sort of identify sexual minorities, gender minorities, women, and it's being led in some ways by our younger members that are wired this way at birth for just equality. And it gives me hope, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. I tweeted out the other day, this tweet: let's extend a wide margin of grace and kindness to our LGBTQ members, and I would add parents of LGBTQ kids, many of whom are active in the church today and following its teachings partly on the hope for ongoing restoration, Article of Faith 9, for better options for their future. So listeners, and this isn't Nate and Elena don't need to hear this, but I just think we need to create space for members that hope things change, even potentially doctrine to change. And let's don't make them unfaithful because their hopes go down that road. Let's admire their faithfulness to participate in the church, even at the same time they have hope that something changes. And that, to me, because I like things that bring hope into people's lives, but if I just shut down your hope by saying, God has revealed his will exactly on gender minorities and sexual minorities, and we're at the finish line and there's no more work to do here, that just sort of shuts down the conversation. That's right. It's possible it's true. I don't think that's true because everything I'm seeing is that group is not having the same experience as straight members are, and you are seeing that firsthand in your family. So listeners, let's do things that create hope in others. Even if people bravely open up and say, I hope something changes in our church down the road. Let's don't call them unfaithful for that. Mm-hmm. We're kind of at the end. Any last thoughts? I don't have anything else I'm going to say. So
no, I think that we have covered it, and I can't thank you enough, Richard, for the wonderful work that you do in getting this information out, because it can save lives and it can save testimonies. That hope that you're talking about, this gives me hope that you are listening to us, and that maybe someone listening to your podcast will also, pay it forward to their kids or their ward members, so this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Nate and Elena, you two are awesome and represent the very best of our church. Listeners, if you're not familiar with my book, it's called Listen, Learn, and Love, Embracing LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. It's a Desert Book. It's at Amazon. I did dedicate a chapter to transgender Latter-day Saints because sometimes their stories are behind gay and lesbian and other. And so I wanted to just talk specifically about that group of people in chapter 8, so you could read that chapter. It's not a long chapter. I hope that more content is developed in this space. Stories are critical for help us to understand better tools to minister, support, and create a feeling of belonging. But thank you, our listeners. This is Richard Osler with Nate and Elena signing off on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.